Back to basics, primary colors. So today we're going to go back to elementary school art class, and we're going to talk about, first of all, the color wheel, right? And paint box colors or primary colors, right? Why are they so effective, or in other cases, not so much, right? But let's go very basically through before we start what all of that means, right? Because it's very complex and there's a lot of science, and I won't get into all of that. But primary colors, right? Generally, when we think of basic primary colors, we think of the colors on your screen, right? Red, yellow, and blue. And those are what we consider true primary colors, right? And there's two facets to that, really. So when you're speaking of the perception of light, green, red, and blue are true primary colors. And when you're speaking of pigment, red, yellow, and blue are primary colors. So today we're going to do a presentation on all four. A little controversial because I'm throwing green in there because it's the primary color for perception of light, but it's used just as much in visuals as the other three. Then we have our secondary colors, right? So that's our purple, our orange, our green, and our tertiary colors, which combines primary colors to its closest secondary color. And then we have our complementary colors, which is generally the fun colors that we think about, right? Aquamarine, periwinkle, marigold, fuchsia, scarlet, maroon, right? You add white for tint, black for shade, gray for tone, and then you have a complete Crayola crayon box, right? So that's the breakdown very quickly of color theory, right? Or rather the color wheel. But why are primary colors so classic, right? Why do they attract customers, or in some cases don't? And while there's an exact science to color, right? If you think of wavelengths and photoreceptor cells in your eye and your retina, you don't need to understand any of that to make color choices. And in fact, most of us do it subconsciously, right? We do it of our own accord and don't even realize we're doing that. And that basically means that brands always want to choose wisely, because not choosing wisely when it comes to color palettes can cause combinations that turn consumers off completely. So in this photo, we've got great examples of combinations that work beautifully together. Bottom right corner, we see the famous Yves Saint Laurent collection #2, right? Inspired by Piet Mondrian's composition #2, which was primarily used red, yellow, and blue, and then they threw in white and black to differentiate. Let's push forward. Whoops. There we go. All right, primary color theory. So we are essentially conditioned from an early age to make color associations, right? We recognize that ketchup is red because we understand that the color of a tomato is red, right? We understand what color tomatoes are, so of course we associate that ketchup would also be red. And when it comes to any marketable or noteworthy design, whether for a product or a brand, color always plays this key role in how to recognize it, right? It's a good place to start to identify your brand's personality. And we see it in pop culture. We see it all over every facet visually, not just the fashion industry or the retail industry. We see it in pop culture. On the right, we can see an example of Versace using primary colors very smartly. It's bold. It looks like a explosion of a crayon box, right? We see some great examples of design on the left. Right, that is our canary yellow, Kermit green, cobalt blue, fire engine red, right? These colors have been called different things. But let's take a look at it in pop culture. So in pop culture, we see primary colors effectively used in every facet of pop culture and modern day culture, right? Whether it's film, music, art, technology. Chime in if you have a favorite brand or a favorite moment in pop culture that you feel like really embodied a primary color brilliantly. My favorite example, hands down, is The Wizard of Oz, right? It's one of the most important films of all time, partly because of its innovation and use in Technicolor, right? This was an escapist story about optimism in post-Depression America, but part of the giant success of the film was their use of color, right? The way that they shot Auntie M's farm in Kansas is all sepia toned, right? So it feels very drab, very sort of sad and melancholy. And the minute you jump into the land of Oz, it's immediate Technicolor, right? Even in this photo, we have a girl dressed in a blue dress, wearing ruby red slippers, walking down a yellow brick road to an emerald green city, right? It takes all of our primary colors and makes this explosion of Technicolor. It was brilliant. down to what you probably use every single day, multiple times a day. Most of us, it's our default browser, right? Google, right? Google, the most popular search engine in the world, recognized that primary colors were easily recognizable, and so they used it in their logo, right? Blue, red, yellow, and then just a pop of green on that L. The reason they put that secondary color in there was because they wanted people to know that they didn't follow the rules when it came to regular search engines, right? And then we see on the right examples in music with the Beatles and Yellow Submarine, and Roy Lichtenstein. Of course, he exclusively used primary colors in his famous comic strip inspired pieces. So just examples of how we see this every day and where we see it, and we don't even recognize that that's what we're sort of looking at. We just know that it's satisfying for some reason, right? So how do you translate that into retail, right? How do you make that successful narrative sort of shift into a space where you can influence people to buy your things? Well, this way. So we see this, color represents brand in a really, really important way because it can subliminally root messaging in there, and it can also absolutely influence the way we feel. It's an important form of visual communication, right? Psychologically, brands and logos and colors, it creates brand recognition up to 80%, right? So we really associate certain brands with the colors, not only the typographies of the logos, but the colors that are sort of linked to them, right? It also accounts for 85% of the reason we buy something. So color is inextricably linked to certain logos. And here we have great examples of all four of our primary colors, right? Let's start with top left corner, red. It is arresting, it increases your heart rate, it can signify danger, right? Think of stop signs or red lights. It can trigger urgency, which is why news networks generally have red logos, right? CNN, BBC. It's also why a sale sign is red in a store. And it's also associated with passion and romance and excitement. And excitement for retailers, that's Target, Uniqlo, Supreme, Levi's, H&M, right? Louboutin, Macy's, the Red Star, the Coca-Cola logo, right? Very iconic. Moving on to bottom right corner, blue. Blue indicates trust, authority, stability, dependability, right? Blue can make you feel very calm. Think of elements in nature that are blue, the earth, or rather the sky, the ocean. This is why spas are generally blue. And a lot of social media, tech companies, and financial institutions will use blue logos to enable trust, right? That's Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, AT&T, Samsung, IBM, Amex, Visa, Chase. The list goes on and on. Trust us with your data, trust us with your intellectual property, your finances, right? It starts to all make sense. Yellow is a fun color, right? Yellow is cheery, it's bright, it's a warm color, right? Blue is a cool color, yellow is a warm color. It makes people feel enthusiastic and happy and optimistic. Most brands use yellow to express that they're lighthearted. A lot of food brands will use yellow, right? To me, the quintessential yellow brand is McDonald's, right? Those golden arches, you see them from a mile away anytime you're on a highway or you're traveling. You recognize them globally, right? Whether you're in China or whether you're in Australia, everyone knows those yellow golden arches. And there's a reason why, you know, that red and yellow box is called a Happy Meal, right? They have marketed that color to be very specific to their brand. And finally, top right corner, we've got green, which, as you would imagine, green represents growth and abundance and harmony and nature, right? And environment, a sense of healing. A lot of agricultural companies and sort of eco-food brands will use green logos, right? Whole Foods is a great example. Lacoste, right? Their logo is the famous crocodile, of course, which, you know, when you think of animals and exotic things, of course, you think of nature. And Starbucks, right? Starbucks, you know, makes coffee, but the beans come from the earth. So it's a part of their sort of brand language. Let's take a look at some examples of primary colors used in different ways for campaigns and store designs. So let's go ahead and start with the Milli Chromatic campaign, right? So this celebrated beautiful colors around the world. And yes, you're probably going to be like, hey, there's pink and gray in there. That's not a primary color. I totally understand. But I think it's a smart use of primary colors. They actually cast this very diversely as well. Women across all different ethnic backgrounds intentionally to go with this idea of appearance and primary and sort of other. Top right corner, we've got Uniqlo. Uniqlo built their entire store design around color coding their products, right? If you've ever walked into a Uniqlo, it's a rainbow, right? Everything you need is developed or is situated according to color and then size, right? So their rainbow, their green, red, blue, and yellow to me feels very smart. And the same thing with Sonia Rykiel down on the bottom right-hand corner. Moving on to Dior on the left. So this 1960s youthquake inspired campaign, right? They used red, yellow, and blue primary colors to highlight, and then any of the text or any of the important elements that they wanted you to sort of read is set on black and white, right? Newspaper. And the youthquake movement of the 1960s was all about feminism coming to the forefront. So I like that they use primary colors to teach something that should be very sort of elementary in concept, right? To the right, we have Louis Vuitton, sorry, it's not Dior at all. Louis Vuitton, September 2018, right? This was one of their window installations. So we've got that primary fire engine red, the product in the center, and it's surrounded by a really beautiful use of sort of color blocking with these blue and yellow butterflies, right? So we've got some blue, some yellow, and then the pop of red, and the product, of course, is where the eye instantly will want to go to. Moving on, this is one of my favorite uses of color blocking that I've seen in a really long time. This is a gorgeous use of primary color blocking from Dior. This was at the Dallas Museum of Art. We actually took a look at this exhibit a couple weeks ago when we explored exhibits. Not this particular photo, but this exhibit. And this sort of is a testament to Dior's versatility, right? Not only can they create something soft and feminine, they can create something really bold and really dynamic. And again, they've chosen to use green in addition to red, yellow, and blue to complement, and then that nice pop of sort of Dior gray, which is one of their house codes. It's romantic, it's feminine, right? And again, this was from the Dallas Museum of Art's exhibition. It was Dior from Paris to the World. Let's take a look at some packaging. So not only when you walk into a store do you want to, or through the recognition of the color of a brand logo, right? Do you want to have that color experience, but in packaging as well. It's really important, especially with how big e-commerce is, particularly at this moment in time, right? People are shopping online more than ever because, things are limited outside and limited resources and store openings. So packaging becomes really important. Packaging is always important because it's a first impression, right? A store experience can be very glamorous, and if the packaging experience doesn't translate that, it can leave an impression to a brand that may not be maybe less than ideal. So we see Fendi with their very beautiful bright canary yellow. It's part of their house code. Bottom right, we have Valentino. Valentino, I always associate with red. It's eponymous to them, right? Red and Valentino. When I think of Valentino, I think of the red carpet looks that they're associated with, old Hollywood glamour, right? And in fact, Red Valentino, which is their sister brand to Valentino, RED is actually an acronym that means romantic eccentric dress, right? So the Red Valentino line is entirely designed with the idea of red in mind. So I love their packaging. It matches to me what their aesthetic is. And this is also a good example of, when you get these boxes, we throw plastic bags away or paper bags away, but this is something that would be upcycled in a home, right? People would keep this box because it's so beautiful and maybe keep their product in it or later use it for other sort of Marie Kondo reasons, right? So these are the kinds of packages that people want to hold onto and reuse and renew, recycle, right? On the right, we've got Ace and Tate. This was designed for their store in Copenhagen. So the base is all white, and then we've got accents of yellow, red, and blue. Those primary colors kind of evoke this experience of an artist studio. That was the inspiration for this particular store. And they wanted it to feel very blocky and very kind of young and fun. It was inspired by a Danish artist named Franziska Clausen. She is a cubist painter that exclusively works with primary colors. So they thought if she was going to make a store, what would that look like? And this was their sort of experiment in their approach to that, with preserving sort of clear graphic lines across the store. It's a sunglass store, if you're wondering, or glasses rather. Moving on to, we've got two separate interpretations of children's brands, right? So these brands aren't particularly children's. These stores just happen to be part of their children's sector. So I like this because it's two completely different brands with distinct playful approaches to in-store designs for their children's collections, right? So Montclair on the left opened their first children's boutique in Milan, and they chose Fire Engine Red with polka dots. And this to me, even though it's not, it feels very Yayoi Kusama. It has that kind of playful young effect. It's very whimsical. It's really silly, right? And Montclair is not necessarily a brand that I consider whimsical or silly, but they understood if you're going to bring in and attract a younger market like children, you have to include those elements. And then Crocs on the right is definitely a brand that, first of all, they do not take themselves seriously. If you've ever seen a pair of Crocs, right, they're these kind of rubber clogs that have these holes in them. So they already have a sense of fun about them. And this entirely blue room is highlighted with that nice rainbow effect. This was for their 10th year anniversary. They built this pop-up. So I think that's two smart ways to attract kids' attentions, right? Kids are so prone to make color choices. They will lean toward bold colors as opposed to adults that like more mutable tones. So this is very smart when they were building their children's spaces. And then we move on to Bergdorf Goodman. So for the launch of their pop-up shop, Passport to Peru, they featured 5 Peruvian designers, contemporary and ready-to-wear collections using wholly sustainable alpaca fiber. So that's why we see those alpacas. But what instantly, besides the fact that the alpacas and the llamas are really fun, what grabs me is their use of color, right? It's a great use of primary and secondary color blends, right? On the left, we have blue, and green, and on the right we have red, yellow, and then inevitably orange and pink, which are secondary to the red and the yellow, right? So super fun. Hermes. So something else that we do generally with color, and again, sort of subliminal and subconscious, we don't recognize it, is color helps us process and store images into our memory. And there is a scientific link between color and geometric shapes, right? We associate certain shapes with certain colors. So often we'll see visual merchandisers use primary colors paired with geometric shapes to showcase products, right? Certain handbags or shoes are already in a specific kind of shape, so they're sort of playing off of that, and that's your triangles, circles, squares, diamonds, exactly. And Hermes does a really good job of that, of fusing those together in these different installations, right? Moving on, here on the left, you can see Banner has done the same exact thing, this link between geometric shapes and primary colors with the green triangles, the yellow circles, the red squares, right, and variations on all of those things. And then to the right, while it's not true primary colors, right, I think this is a beautiful use of color grading with their rainbow from Alice and Olivia. So now we're going to take a look at what the primary colors look like when they are bold and in your face and sort of all by themselves, speaking their own language, right? And color, it's important to note that color is a cultural construct, right? Society gives color a meaning. Color doesn't instinctively have a meaning until we put that on it, right? So let's take a look at some. We're going to look at green first, followed by yellow, blue, and then red. I have 3 examples of each. And by all means, I want you to think of the first thing you think of when you see these images, write them down or text them, because I want to hear your thoughts and see if you fell into the sort of psychology of what color is supposed to allegedly make you feel. So let's take a look at green. Boom, right. So instantly what most people think when they look at this image is like provocative, right? Hypersexual, very sexy, right? You think of J-Lo, you don't necessarily think of the dress. But in 2000 at the Grammy Awards, she wore the infamous Versace green dress. If you Google Versace green dress, it is the most Googled garment of all time. In fact, it's so popular it has its own Wikipedia page, right? And while it is very provocative, green at the time in 2000 was an unusual red carpet color, partly because it sort of clashed with the red carpet, right? So this was very bold. It was one of Donatella's first designs for the house, or first sort of infamous designs for the house. And this image of this is from the anniversary, not the original image. I thought the anniversary image was more dynamic. But the original image of J-Lo in the Versace green dress was downloaded almost 700,000 times within 24 hours of the Grammy Awards, right? And this, does anybody know what launched because of this green dress? Anybody want to take a guess? In the tech world? It was so powerful that I wish someone on Instagram knows. It was so powerful that it actually launched Google Images, right? So Google had already, sort of gained speed as the biggest search engine in the world, and yet they somehow hadn't figured that people would be looking up images, right? Not necessarily data or information or facts, but images. And this dress was the impetus for those designers to go back and build a Google image library. It all started with the power of this green dress, right? Moving on. So this is green within a retail space, right? So this was for the Louis Vuitton pop-up for the fall 2019 men's collection by Virgil Abloh. In addition to the walls and the ceiling, the floor completely covered in this really vibrant neon green, right? The space's furniture was all green, the fixtures, the decor. It rendered this like psychedelic day glow, acid colored green, right? It was really, really dynamic. And the reason Virgil chose this green, it's a very particular green, is because he wanted to invite followers to come into the store and turn the store into a giant green screen. So you could reinvent Louis Vuitton's entire platform and green screen and Photoshop, right? There's no shortage of people online who like to memeify something. And that's exactly what he wanted millennials to do. He wanted people to come into the store, see the products, try them on, and then turn the entire store into whatever you thought it should look like. And if you Google Louis Vuitton green pop-up Virgil Abloh Photoshop, you'll see that it's been turned into a field of flowers, a galaxy. It's pretty amazing how creative people can get. So this is a fun way to have Louis Vuitton sort of interpreted through the lens of meme culture and pop culture. And then we move on to a classic, beautiful example of just stunning visual merchandising, right? This is Bergdorf Goodman. This was their 2016 holiday campaign. It was called Destination Extraordinary. Most of the windows that year were all green. I could have used all of them as an example, but this one I think feels really unique. It almost glows, right? It kind of glows through the screen. It's so pretty. And it's delirious. David Hoey, who's the creative director of visuals at Bergdorf Goodman, said it's like a delirious remake of a classic diorama seen at the Natural History Museum, right? And Bergdorf commissioned Burke and Pride to build all of these elements with a blend of natural plant material and beading. So like I said, what does green make you feel? It makes you, reminds you of the environment, right? Eco-consciousness. So using green in this sense, this particular installation is called The Book Club, and it's inspired by Rudyard Kipling's classic The Jungle Book, right? And if I think of The Jungle Book, instantly when I think of a jungle, I think of green, I think of organic matter, I think of life, of plants, right? Things that come of this earth. So this to me was a beautiful use of green. I loved this window this year. I thought it was really, really dynamic. Let's move on to yellow, our happy color, right? So yellow, following the extensive renovations that they did on this store on Madison Avenue, Calvin Klein reopened their store and they redid entirely the interior to completely cover it in this really cheery, bright yellow, right? It was a reimagination for the brand, right? Calvin Klein is very much a minimalist brand. I don't think of them as maximalists at all. And this was their interpretation of maximalism in their store. It was bright and cheery and really sort of fun, and then they've highlighted and drawn the attention to the mannequins and the product, right? So if they wanted you to really look at something with the sort of wash of yellow, it's highlighted with red, either through those red bricks where you can see the shoes or the bags, or the red mannequins where you can see the collection. And this installation was done by an artist named Sterling Ruby, and they wanted to sort of take the idea of create a physical interpretation of Calvin Klein restructuring as a brand. So they got a new creative director at the time in 2017, which was Raf Simons. And this idea of restoring and reinventing they did with a completed collection in a sort of, what is this called? In an environment that was not finished, right? So they wanted it to feel almost like it was under construction because the brand was reconstructing. So I thought that was a really fun interpretation of how they used yellow. Also with yellow, yellow to me, when I think mostly of like yellow brands, I instantly think of this brand. I think of Lego. Here we see it, very youthful, very juvenile, right? And color schemes always best convey by a brand if you think about it in the rule of like 60-30-10 when you're designing, right? And this basically offers 60% background, 30% base, and then 10% accent. That's how you want to think of your use of primary colors. And here we see that represented really smartly. We've got 60% yellow background, 30% of the white base where all the product is, and then 10% of the accents with the red and the blue, right? And they wanted their logo to stand out from that yellow, right? Even their store is designed to look like a Lego brick. Their light fixtures are built like actual little Lego bricks. But they put their logo in white, highlighted it in yellow, and then sort of put it on the background of red to capture attention. So we see a lot of yellow from beauty brands, and in each case, sort of yellow is like subtly, there's a splash of bright focus and then a quick reminder of brand identity. So here are 4 great examples of beauty brands that use yellow. And why is yellow so popular with beauty brands? You know, most people think of beauty brands and they think of millennial pink. And millennial pink has its place in the beauty industry. We talked about it last week. We'll see it when we do our pink week. But Gen Z kids are more inclined to sort of trust yellow. And so while the millennials have like pink, we're starting to see this emergence of like Generation Z yellow. And this is smart because yellow can be a very striking color, right? It can cause a lot of eye strain. So it's usually something you don't want to use entirely. But this yellow is a little more subtle. It's a little more subdued, right? Yellow also has medicinal properties associated with it. So the beauty market capitalizing on that is really smart, right? When you think of beauty products, I instantly think of you know, pharmaceutical things, not in terms of pills, but in terms of, you know, medicinal properties and healing properties to a toner or moisturizer or, you know, any of those kinds of products. And beauty brands often want to feel medicinal. So most of their stores have the idea, not most, but some interpret that like an apothecary, right? We see that from Kiehl's in the center. To the right, we've got Burt's Bees. To the left, we have Acqua di Parma, right, which we had a fantastic chat on a couple of Thursdays ago as to why they chose their yellow. And then on the top left corner, L'Occitane, right? L'Occitane picked yellow because it reminded them of the provincial French sun. And for Acqua di Parma, they use yellow as their base color, and then they highlight with red, blue. Oftentimes you'll find yellow paired with blue. It works really beautifully together. Moving on to blue. So for over 20 years, Pantone's color of the year has basically influenced developmental things with product purchasing and decisions in every industry, right? Fashion, home furnishings, the industrial design, as well as product packaging, and even graphic design, right? So every year Pantone picks a color, and this year for 2020 that color is classic blue. And according to their website, classic blue is quote unquote instills calm, confidence, and connection. This enduring blue hue highlights our desire for a dependable and stable foundation on which to build as we cross the threshold into a new era. So that was their thinking and logic behind choosing the color blue. So these are some great examples of blue, similar to Pantone and to what Google did, right? If you Google right now, Pantone 1837, as we're talking, you are going to get one color and one color alone. That is, Pantone 1837 is the official color of Tiffany and Company, right? It is their patented Robin Eggs blue. It's directly below on the left corner. We see an example of their window in New York City. And Tiffany blue is at the core of their brand identity, right? And their visual identity, their brand DNA. It was actually developed by Gene Moore during his time at Tiffany and Company. And Tiffany really is a brand that understands that we shop instinctively using color and shape as our primary sort of triggers for recognition. fashion. So their blue is their brand DNA, right? It's patented. It's really beautiful, and they use it, especially with their boxing, their packaging, right? The Tiffany blue box, you cannot just walk in and ask for a box. You have to purchase something from Tiffany. And to me, again, it's very synonymous with Tiffany and Company. And here we see it playfully used. We see a mouse with all of his little blue traps, and he caught the one little piece of cheese, which happens to be a canary diamond. So again, blue complemented with yellow. And then in the top or the right side, we see the Spring Summer 2020 show. It was a genderless runway presentation from Balenciaga. The entire room, wall to wall, carpeting, ceiling, chairs, everything was this bright, beautiful, sort of cobalt blue, and really sort of smart blue on blue on blue, right? It's sort of overkill, except that it really does work. Moving on to Harvey Nichols, right? A lot of like mixed media. This is just a beautiful melding of, again, geometric shapes and blue. I love the composition of this window at Harvey Nichols. I think it's really pretty. It's really calming, right? And then we see that pop of red on the product on the purse. And then our final example of blue before we move on to red is interior design. Now this is a store in, I believe the store is particularly in China. This is from Miu Miu. And this interior design sort of like dipped into Miu Miu's periwinkle color, right? So their periwinkle blue, again, very, very singular to their brand. And they captured this in the entire store experience, right? The walls, the ceiling, the carpeting, all of the furniture and the fixtures are all blue. The walls are also covered in damask, which is a signature element for Miu Miu and their design code. And the motif also is reflected into all of the display tables. So we see it in the shelving, the clothing racks, the cabinet lining, all the walls. All of it is this really soft blue, and it feels very calming, and it feels very relaxed and very sort of soft, right? Let's jump on to red. So from feeling very calm, this is kind of like a record scratch, right? Red is so dynamic, right? And in the West, like Western interpretations of red are very romantic and sexy and passionate, right? Think of Valentine's Day with pretty red hearts, right? And this is a beautiful installation by Kleinfeld Bridal, and Kleinfeld's core business is elevating the bridal industry, which basically capitalizes on romance through weddings, right? So this is very smart of them to associate this beautiful Panina Torne wedding gown with the color red, the color of passion and the color of commitment, right? So it's really beautiful. I just love how elaborate it is, and we see this sort of beautiful, almost like a maze built in, and the product is just like all the way in the back, right? But it's a beautiful use and pop of red. On to the king of red, right? Christian Louboutin is synonymous with the color red, right? It's not a Louboutin unless you see that red bottom sole. And they uniquely use color strategy as an integral part of their brand narrative, right? So much so that, you know, you don't even need to see the top of the shoe to know what it is. You just need to see the bottom to understand what that shoe is. And they actually had the design for the reds, or the idea for the design in 1993. And this is like one of those fashion urban legends, right? Everyone sort of knows a different variation of this story. But Christian Louboutin had designed a prototype, and one of his employees was sitting in the room painting her nails. And she was, of course, painting her nails red. And he snagged the bottle and thought that the prototype was just lacking. There was something that wasn't particularly special about this shoe. He painted the bottom of the shoe with the red nail polish, and just like that, the red soles were born, right? And this use of red transformed a part of a shoe that had previously been ignored, and it turned it into something both aesthetically exciting and commercially useful, right? If a woman or man walks down the street and you're in front of them and you're looking at their feet and you see that pop of red, you instantly recognize that as a Louboutin. This installation was called the Louboutin Express, and it is a makeshift train paying homage to the country of Bhutan in the Himalayas. This was a capsule collection that was entirely inspired by Bhutan. And on the right, we see this classic sort of Bhutanese themed dining carriage, of course, in the classic Louboutin red. And then our final example, so I said this, our final example of our primary color at the beginning, but I really, this is red especially is so polarizing that it has different meanings, right? So does blue. While blue makes people feel, safe and makes people feel calm, it also is the color that's associated with depression, right? I've got the blues, right? And red does that in a much more polarizing way. So in the West, we interpret red with, passion and but in the East, it's a completely different interpretation, right? So our final primary red example is all about the sort of look at color perception, which is 100% cultural, right? Red in Eastern Chinese culture is very auspicious. It's very lucky, right? This is a window that was done by Macy's, and this installation was done for the Lunar New Year. So every February, all around the world, we see beautiful pops of red pop up. It's not for Valentine's Day, it is for the Lunar New Year, which uses red to symbolize luck and joy and happiness. Brides, many Chinese brides wear red on their wedding day, right? So again, it's very auspicious, and it's interesting to see, how you could use red during the Lunar New Year, or how you could use red during the holidays, or how you could use red during Valentine's Day, right? It's one of those effective colors. So that is our look at primary colors. All right, I'm gonna open it up to some questions. If anybody has any questions for us, I'm here for you. Let me go ahead and open the chat, see if I can see that. While we're waiting for questions to come in, I should mention that what you're seeing directly in front of you this Thursday, it is very, very exciting. We are going to be announcing the winners of the WindowsWear Student Awards. So this Thursday at 3 p.m., we're going to be announcing that. All of the students and professors are going to be present, and we will get to celebrate all of the participants in the winners. So please feel free to join us this Thursday at 3 p.m. for our Student Awards. All right, stop screen share. So does anybody have any questions? From someone, you Kate me on Instagram. After JLo learned about launching Google Images, she said, Google, where's my check? That's right. She was asked in an interview, hey, how do you feel about wearing the most Googled dress in the world? And she was like, I feel really great about it. I'd probably feel better if you cut me a check from all those searches, right? She's doing pretty okay financially, I think, though. But that green dress, so dynamic. In fact, that photo that I showed of the green dress was from its anniversary. So the dress just had an anniversary. How often do we host these? Great question, Kate, and thanks for asking. Nice to see you, Kate. Every Tuesday. So we host WindowsWear Live with myself every Tuesday, and every Thursday we host WindowsWear Live with an industry professional. So we have different members of the industry. This Thursday is actually going to be our student awards, but the Thursday following we're going to have another guest speaker. I believe that's Eric Fagenbaum from WindowsWear, amongst many other places, but he'll be doing a chat on retail spaces. All right, another question. How is it possible to become a part of WindowsWear? Great question. So all you got to do is go to windowswear.com and sign up. It's that simple. You can open a free account and sign up and be a part of our community. There are also brand accounts and student accounts and all those sorts of things. But if you just sign up, we will get in touch with you and we will get some information to you to see which membership would be best for you. Someone asked, which color best balances Eastern and Western cultures? So I'm actually going to defer to all of you guys and see what you think because that's a really subjective question, right? And color is absolutely subjective, right? People are very passionate about the colors they like and more importantly, the colors they don't like. I think red, realistically, red balances, I think, east and west or complements, right? East and west, just because there's so many great examples of both across both sort of different schools of thought or philosophies around the color red. So my guess would be red. Yeah. Rosa Creativa. I usually use the color schemes for color combinations. Should I not limit myself? Can you recommend me other harmonious color theories? So anything that complements will be a smart use of color, right? The reason why orange and red don't go well together and are generally problematic color combinations is because they're derivative, right? So that can make the confuse the eye, right? The reason why blue and yellow or blue and green work so well together is because they're complementary. So I would definitely think that using anything that's complementary or tertiary next to each other would work, right? Like Calvin Klein, I like that Calvin Klein used bright yellow and that Louis Vuitton used bright green. Won't the color influence the color of the products? That's a great question. What was their conversion rate at those specific stores, right? Did the green work to Louis Vuitton's advantage to sell their keep all bags or Virgil's collection? Did the bright, school bus yellow work for Calvin Klein to sell, a black bag or a red pair of shoes? I don't particularly have those numbers for the conversion rates into sales, but I would imagine if anything, it was effective in getting people in and starting a conversation, right? Whether that's good or bad, because again, color is completely subjective and it is cultural and people have their own interpretations. These are rules and theories, right? But we call it color theory. We don't call it, color fact. So it's always a little subjective. Let's see. I'm learning so much from you. Thank you very much. Well, thank you for joining us and thank you for answering your question. I'm glad that I was able to answer that question. What are your thoughts? I want to hear from you guys. Anyone in Zoom want to give some thoughts on anything they saw or things that they find successful in their interpretations of color? Frank, why did you choose orange for your F for your photo?
It chose me, I think.
Oh, did
Um,
it?
yeah, but what it's interesting is in the digital display world, when they create content, they always start with a black background that rather than a white background and build from there. So I just found the analogy interesting about how people develop brands. They may look a little different on a black background of a digital display where I work.
100%. Yeah, and
Yeah.
there's a reason why I think white is very, white is very a of all eye strain. When I think of designing digitally, I don't want to stare at a white screen at all. I think this is also why a lot of social media brands got away and started offering black screens, right? Or
Mm.
why we were seeing the effect of blue light, right? Blue light sort of hurting our eyes and making us really tired, right? So you got to use color smartly. And black is like a very sleek color. It's like the gold standard, right? And some websites work beautifully in black and some just don't. And I think that's a combination of the way they build their content, right? Their typography, what the
Hmm.
content is, right? That all depends on, what it is you're trying to sell. But like black and, complementary colors work really well together. Black and pink, right? Just like white and primary works well together. But yeah, so the orange chose you. Interesting.
Yeah.
As your avatar. Orange is a very, orange is one of those colors like yellow, right? It incites, some people say that orange incites violence, right? And some people, there's a theory that the reason why, jumpsuits in prison are orange, that, it's to sort
Hmm.
of I don't know much about that, but I would assume, like the show Orange is the New Black, right? If you're thinking of the American jail system, I should say, not every prison system is the same. But orange can be a very boisterous, loud color, right? Someone had a question. Okay. What is a brand that you like for their use of color. Anybody chime in on this? I think this should be a catch-all. So my personal favorite use of color for a brand, I have to think about that. I think Glossier, it's not my favorite brand, but I think Glossier with their millennial pink packaging is brilliant to me. People love, love, love those little pink bags. They just absolutely love it, right? They keep that packaging, they hang on to it, and that to me is a sign of a smart brand use, right? The Olympic rings. Yes, of course. The Olympic rings are also very famous use of primary colors. That's a fantastic example that could have gone um, in our pop culture uh, section. And how can we best use colors for jewelry window display? Won't the colors lose the focus from the products which are actually quite small? That's a great point. Yes, so with jewelry, I think when you're designing any kind of space for jewelry, you have to keep scale in mind as well as color, right? Most jewelry tends to either be gold or silver. I'm thinking for the most part. So you wouldn't want to necessarily use yellow. I would certainly stay away from yellow. I would even stay away from red, which can be very jarring. I think black and white or neutral tones for jewelry. So that way you don't pull focus, to your point. And then scale. Right? You want to think about scale. If you're selling one single ring, how are you going to scale that on in a visual element, right? In a window or in, a case, right? Usually through repetition. You'll have many, many, many rings so that people can see that reinforced. The most disliked color, green, is also the color that we can see the most values of, hence night vision goggles. Yeah, green is another, again, green is one of those colors. You think of nature, you also think of greed, you also think of envy, right? Green with envy. Green is the color of money, right? So, night vision goggles, yeah, that's a great example of a very specific use of green, right? Green is also the easiest color for the eye to see, which is why our eye perception, which is why I included it in our primary in this chat today. Let's see who else had a question. Benetton uses primary colors very effectively in visual merchandising. Yes, United Colors of Benetton, right? Very similar to what Uniqlo does, right? If you're calling yourself the blank United Colors of Benetton, right? You should be able to color block really smartly and really effectively. I agree. I think that that's a brand that uses their color blocking in a smart way. Louise, Tiffany is my favorite use of color for a brand, hands down. I could do an entire talk on, how Tiffany uses their color. And what's funny is the color is not what's for sale, right? The jewelry is what's for sale, but they have linked their color so smartly to the DNA of their brand that we cannot think of Tiffany without thinking of Robin Eggs Blue, right? I'm not usually a fan of blue, yet I keep my Tiffany packaging. Yes, everybody does. Everybody keeps those Tiffany blue boxes. There is an emotional component to that. And just like, I think we have the strongest memory tied to scent, right? Scent is a very strong trigger for memory. Color is absolutely another big, big trigger for memory. So when we see Robin Eggs Blue, we think Tiffany and Company, right? When you see, yellow, when you see a yellow school bus, you instantly think, oh, you make that association. You know that there are children in there, right? So that's a great association, the Tiffany blue box. Any other questions? Fantastic. Well, that being said, it was so lovely to have everybody here today. Thank you to all of our friends on Instagram Live, on Facebook Live, on Zoom Live. We love having you guys. Thank you so much for joining us. Again, this Thursday at 3 p.m. is the announcement of the WindowsWear Awards. So please join us, Student Awards, I should specify. Our Student Awards, come celebrate our students. They have had quite the challenging year, and these professors have managed to get it together. And so we are excited to celebrate them. Your last last chance to vote is also today. You can go to windowswear.com/student awards if you want to give those students some love. I know that the class of 2020 particularly would appreciate it. So go to windowswear.com/student awards to get your voting in. Voting closes today for those finals announcements that we are going to announce the winners on Thursday at 3 p.m. On behalf of WindowsWear, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Thank you to all of you. And next Tuesday, we are going to be tackling props. So we're going to take a look at what we call prop culture, the use of oversized props in the retail space. So join us again next week, Tuesday at 3 p.m. and this Thursday at 3 p.m. for the WindowsWear Awards. Have a fantastic afternoon. Stay happy, stay safe. We'll see you next Thursday.